Elena Jensen smoothed the last patient chart, her movements precise even after 12 hours. The oncology ward hummed a low, familiar tune behind her, a symphony of fragile hope and quiet battles. She was tired, bone deep, but the meticulous care she poured into her work never wavered. Each cleaned instrument, each precisely folded sheet, a small act of defiance against the chaos of illness. Tonight, though, the weight of the day pressed down. Her blue scrubs felt heavy, not with the day's toil, but with a different kind of burden. Whispers of incidents in the hospital parking garage had grown louder lately, chilling the already cold concrete. This place should be a sanctuary, she thought, her jaw tightening. Safe. That was her quiet, unwavering mission. Born from a past she rarely spoke of, a past that taught her the cost of silence. She would not let this hospital become another place where safety was a luxury, not a right. The elevator's hum died, leaving her alone in the cavernous silence of level P3. The air here was always colder, damp with the smell of exhaust fumes and forgotten dreams. Concrete pillars loomed like ancient sentinels, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the weak, flickering fluorescent lights. Every echo of her sensible shoes on the stained asphalt sounded too loud, too vulnerable, amplifying the thumping rhythm of her own heart. She walked faster, her hand gripping the strap of her worn canvas bag, her eyes darting between the empty spaces, the hidden corners. Her beat-up sedan, reliable and unremarkable, waited in its usual spot, a small, familiar comfort. Just as her fingers brushed the cold metal of the door handle, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom near a support column, a tall, imposing figure. "Well, well, Nurse Jensen, working late again?" The voice was a low, gravelly growl, familiar in the worst possible way. It was him, Officer Miller, not in uniform, but she knew that face, that sneer. He'd been loitering, making her skin crawl for weeks, his presence a constant, unsettling pressure. Her stomach dropped, cold and sudden. Every instinct screamed run. "Don't bother screaming, sweetheart. No one's listening down here." His hand shot out, a blur of motion grabbing her arm, twisting it with bruising force. Panic flared, hot and sharp, seizing her breath. She struggled, a wild, desperate energy surging through her. Her bag flew from her shoulder, her phone clattering to the ground, the screen cracking with a sickening crunch that echoed in the vast space. He pulled her closer, his breath hot and foul on her face, reeking of stale cigarettes and something else. Something ugly and predatory. "You're going to regret ignoring me, ignoring all my warnings." His grip tightened, fingers digging into her skin, and Eleanor felt a cold dread spread through her veins, a terrifying certainty that she was truly alone. Then, a sudden guttural roar ripped through the concrete cavern. Impossibly loud, impossibly close. It wasn't human. It was an engine, powerful, an angry beast tearing through the silence. Headlights, blinding and intense, swung around the corner, cutting a violent, brilliant path through the suffocating shadows. A sleek, black, luxury SUV, impossibly large and darkly gleaming, slammed to a halt, tires squealing faintly, blocking the main exit ramp with casual authority. The driver's door swung open with a heavy metallic thud, a sound of finality. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad, a silhouette of raw power against the blinding glare of his own headlights. Scars etched a story across his jaw, half hidden by the dimness, but his eyes, sharp and cold and utterly lethal, found him. Officer Miller froze, his grip on Eleanor loosening by a fraction, his sneer replaced by a flicker of fear. That was all it took. The man's voice, a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the silence like a scalpel through flesh, sliced the heavy air. "If you touch her, you die." Officer Miller didn't wait. The words, sharp and cold, hit him like a physical blow. His face, seconds ago twisted in a leer, contorted with a sudden, animalistic fear. The grip on Elena's arm vanished, leaving behind angry red marks. He scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet, a pathetic, desperate figure melting into the deeper gloom of the garage, swallowed by the shadows faster than Elena could blink. He was gone, just like that. Elena stood there, trembling, the scent of fear and exhaust fumes thick in the air. Her arm throbbed, a dull ache that grounded her to the terrifying reality of what had just happened. Her phone lay shattered on the concrete, a symbol of her violated peace. She was safe, but the relief was a cold, alien thing, overshadowed by the raw, buzzing adrenaline in her veins. She clutched the visitor's badge, still pinned to her scrubs, her knuckles white. Then, slowly, she lifted her gaze to the man who had spoken, the man who had rescued her. He was closer now, a formidable presence. The headlights still blazed, casting his face in stark contrasts, highlighting the network of scars along his jawline, giving him a dangerous, broken beauty. His eyes, though, were what held her. Dark, unreadable but piercing. They met hers with an intensity that stole her breath all over again. No warmth, no pity, just a raw, unwavering focus. He wasn't a hero from a storybook. He was something else, something far more dangerous, far more real. He won't be back tonight, the man said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of question, but he will be back. Elena swallowed, her throat dry. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but a cold, logical part of her mind, the part that organized patient files and tracked medication schedules, already knew he was right. Miller had been bold, brazen. He wouldn't simply vanish. He'd just regroup. Who are you? She managed, her voice a reedy whisper. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he took another step. Closer, his eyes still locked on hers. You can't stay here. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order, firm and absolute. He's a cop, connected. He'll use the system or his friends to come for you. Her mind reeled. A cop. She'd known, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the implication of a deeper, darker network, sent a fresh wave of dread through her. Her meticulously ordered life, her quiet world of healing and protocols, was suddenly crashing headfirst into something violent and chaotic. This man, with his scars and his dark eyes, and his expensive, powerful car, was an undeniable part of that chaos. But he was also, undeniably, her shield. I have to go home, she insisted, a desperate flicker of her old life. I have to report this, to HR, to the police. He let out a soft, humorless sound that might have been a laugh. You think they'll help you against one of their own? Not like this. Not yet. He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in her bruised arm, her trembling hands, the shattered phone. I can give you protection, real protection. Elena stared at him. Protection? From him or with him? The line was blurred, terrifyingly so. She prided herself on her independence, her ability to handle things, to fight for justice through proper channels. But Miller had just tried to overpower her in a deserted garage, and this man, this stranger, had stopped him with a single sentence and a single glare. This wasn't about filing a report anymore. This was about survival. I need to think, she began, but he cut her off, his voice sharper now. There's no time to think, nurse. He knows where you work. He knows your face. You're a target. Now, are you coming, or are you going to wait for him to finish what he started? Her breath hitched. Finish what he started. The words hung in the air, cold and menacing. She hated the idea of being dependent, of stepping into a world she didn't understand, a world that reeked of danger and illicit power. But the image of Miller's predatory sneer, the memory of his bruising grip, was a far more immediate horror. Her hospital, her patients, her meticulously built life, it all felt flimsy, exposed. She hated it. Every fiber of her being screamed against it, but she knew with a chilling certainty that he was right. She couldn't stay. She couldn't fight this alone. "Fine," Eleanor whispered, the single word a surrender, a desperate gamble. "But I'm not some trophy." Her voice held more steel than she expected, a defiant spark in the face of her fear. His dark eyes held hers for a long moment, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. Then he simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Get in." The black SUV moved with silent, predatory grace, cutting through the sprawling arteries of Los Angeles. Elena watched the city lights blur, a kaleidoscope of distant, uncaring beauty. She was in a stranger's car, with a stranger whose very presence vibrated with coiled power, heading to a place unknown. Her bruised arm throbbed a steady rhythm against her side, a stark reminder of the violence she'd just escaped, and the one she was now driving deeper into. They pulled into a quiet, tree-lined street in the Arts District, far from the hospital's sterile glow. The building was a sleek modern structure of glass and steel, an architectural statement against the vibrant murals that splashed color across the surrounding walls. Salvatore led her through a silent, dimly lit lobby, past an unblinking security camera and into a private elevator that whisked them upwards. The air thrummed with unspoken wealth. The apartment was vast, minimalist, and breathtakingly luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the glittering city, a million tiny lights spread out beneath them like scattered diamonds. Exposed concrete walls, softened by rich, dark wood accents and plush, expensive furniture, spoke of carefully curated taste. A single, enormous abstract. Painting dominated one wall, its swirling colors a stark contrast to the quiet order of the space. It was beautiful, but cold, impersonal, and utterly silent. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end cage. "Bathrooms through there, clothes in the closet," Salvatore stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, gesturing vaguely toward a hallway. He walked to the window, his back to her, a dark, imposing silhouette against the city lights. He didn't offer food or comfort or even a second glance. She was here, safe, that was his only concern. Elena's scrubs, still smelling faintly of hospital antiseptic, felt suddenly alien in this opulent prison. She found a walk-in closet filled with designer clothes that were clearly not for her, but on a shelf, neatly folded, were a fresh pair of soft cotton pajamas. Her size. She felt a prickle of unease. How did he know? After a long, hot shower, the steam doing little to wash away the night's trauma, Eleanor emerged, feeling marginally less raw. Salvatore was still by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He hadn't moved. He hadn't touched a single thing in the apartment, it seemed. He was a statue carved from granite, unyielding and dangerous. "Sit," he commanded without turning. His voice was low, but carried an undeniable weight. Elena sat on the edge of a plush sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The city lights outside seemed to mock her, so close, yet so out of reach. Salvatore finally turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The scars on his jaw were clearer in the ambient light, a roadmap of past battles. "Miller isn't just a cop with a temper," he began, his voice slow, deliberate. "He's tied to a crew, a dirty one. They run extortion, protection rackets. They think they're untouchable because they wear a badge." Elena's breath hitched. A crew. Extortion. It was worse than she'd imagined. Her stomach twisted. "He tried to hurt you," Salvatore continued, his gaze unwavering, intense. He crossed a line. My line." He paused, taking a slow sip of his drink. "I will retaliate. He will pay. They will all pay." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken violence. Elena felt a cold dread, a sickening lurch in her gut. Vengeance. She knew what that looked like. It was messy, it was brutal, and it always had collateral damage. Innocent people, her patients, her hospital. "No," she said, the word a sudden, sharp explosion in the quiet room. She stood, her voice gaining strength with each syllable. "No, you won't. I don't want vengeance, I want justice, a lawful takedown." Salvatore's dark eyebrows lifted, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He set his glass down on a polished table with a soft click. "Justice, nurse? You think the system will give you justice against one of their own? They'll bury you. He'll bury you." "Then we make sure they can't," Elena countered, her chin lifting, a defiant spark in her eyes. "I want him exposed, his whole crew, lawfully. I want to make my hospital safe, Salvatore, not turn it into a battlefield, not become someone else's trophy in a gang war." The last words were a direct challenge, a refusal to be owned, to be merely a reason for his violence. A beat of silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Salvatore watched her, his expression unreadable. He expected fear, perhaps gratitude, certainly not this fiery defiance. An unwilling admiration began to stir within him, a dark, dangerous intrigue. She stood before him, small but resolute, challenging his entire world. He felt an unfamiliar pull, a desire to know what else lay beneath that meticulous, law-abiding exterior. She was no trophy. She was a weapon, waiting for the right hand to wield her, or perhaps to fight alongside her. "Lawful takedown," he repeated, the words slow, tasting them. "You think you can do that?" There was a hint of a challenge, a test in his voice. "I know I can," Elena answered, her gaze unwavering. "With your help. Not your violence." The air crackled between them, a silent battle of wills, a new unsettling current beginning to flow. She felt it, a strange, dark warmth deep inside her, a perilous attraction to the dangerous man who offered her safety, even as she fought his methods. It was terrifying and utterly compelling. The following morning, the apartment felt even more like a gilded cage. Salvatore had disappeared hours ago, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the unsettling silence. She paced the polished floors, the vastness of the space amplifying her restlessness. She hated this feeling of helplessness, of being a pawn in someone else's game. But then a subtle sound caught her attention. A low, vibrating hum coming from a sleek black console table. She approached cautiously. On it, a tablet displayed a live feed, not of her, but of the city specifically, a bustling market in the arts district below. Suddenly, the screen zoomed in. Two men, identifiable by their uniforms, were roughing up a street vendor, overturning his stall. Elena's stomach clenched. She recognized the badge numbers. They were connected to Miller's crew, she was sure of it. Then, a dark, imposing figure stepped into the frame. Salvatore. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply moved. A brief, intense exchange of words Elena couldn't hear. One of the uniformed men lunged. Salvatore parried with a swift, almost imperceptible motion, twisting the man's arm, not breaking it but making a point. The other cop hesitated, then backed down. Salvatore spoke a few more words, his hand briefly resting on the shaken vendor's shoulder. Then he turned, his gaze sweeping the scene before he melted back into the crowd. The two dirty cops, now subdued, were picking up the vendor's spilled produce, their faces grim. Elena stared at the screen, her heart thudding. He hadn't unleashed brute force. He had been decisive, yes, but controlled. He hadn't hurt the bystanders, hadn't escalated it into a bloody street brawl. He had handled it with precision, a surgeon's touch, not a butcher's. It was a terrifying glimpse into his world, A world where power was wielded with calculated intent, not mindless rage. It also showed her his code: decisive force, never against innocence. She saw the danger, yes, but also the strange, dark integrity. He was true to his word, in his own brutal way. When Salvatore returned, the door closing behind him with a soft click, Elena was still standing by the console, the tablet now dark. He moved with a quiet power, a predatory grace that filled the room. His dark eyes found hers, assessing, unreadable. "You saw," he stated, not a question. "I did," Elena confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. "They were Miller's men. They were. And they won't bother that vendor again, or any other." His voice held a quiet finality, a promise kept. You didn't hurt them badly," she observed. A strange sense of relief mixing with her dread. A corner of his mouth twitched, a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture. Unnecessary. The message was clear. He moved to the sleek black bar, pouring himself a drink. "So, nurse, you still believe in your lawful takedown?" Elena met his gaze, her chin lifting. "More than ever. What you did out there, it stops that specific incident, but it doesn't stop the next 2 cops, or the one after that. It doesn't dismantle the system that allows men like Miller to thrive." Her voice hardened. "Vengeance is a temporary fix, Salvatore. Justice is permanent." He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers. "And how do you propose to achieve this permanent justice against an entire department of dirty badges? They will stonewall you. They will bury you in paperwork, discredit you, make you out to be hysterical. You're one nurse. He's a cop." "I have proof," Elena insisted, a surge of adrenaline sharpening her focus. "My HR complaint. It's not just words. And you—" She gestured vaguely towards the tablet. "You have video evidence." Salvatore let out a soft, humorless sound. "My dashcam caught Miller in the garage, yes, clear as day. But it's just one cop, nurse, one incident. They'll spin it. He was provoked. Isolated incident. My word against theirs, and I assure you, my word carries a different kind of weight than what you're used to in a courtroom." He gestured to a small, unassuming black box on a shelf. "The SD card is in there. Take a look if you want." Elena's eyes immediately went to the black box. Her meticulous mind, the one that caught every detail in a patient's chart, was already whirring. One incident? No. It was a starting point, a lever. She saw the disdain in Salvatore's eyes for what he considered insufficient proof, but she also saw the potential. He saw a small piece of a puzzle. She saw the first crucial connection in a complex network. "It might not be enough for your kind of justice," she said. Her voice quiet but firm, "but it's a start for mine." She felt the tension in the room, a palpable force. He offered safety, undeniable and immediate. But her core, her very identity, demanded control, demanded agency. She wasn't just a victim to be protected. She was a force, a mind, a will. Salvatore watched her, a flicker of something new in his dark eyes. Most people would have recoiled from his world, or embraced it fully. Elena, however, stood here, challenging him, her intelligence, burning bright even amidst her fear. He had expected gratitude, perhaps fear-induced compliance. Instead, he found a woman who refused to be defined by her trauma, who insisted on her own path, even if it meant defying him. A strange, undeniable respect began to bloom in the dangerous landscape of his heart. She challenged him, and he found himself, against all his instincts, intrigued. He wanted to see how far she would push. He wanted to see what she was truly capable of. "So," he said, the word a slow drawl. "You want to play lawyer, Nurse Jensen?" Elena met his gaze, unflinching. "I want justice, Salvatore. and I intend to get it. Your way or mine?" The unspoken question hung in the air. Which side are you on? The luxurious apartment, once a stark sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. Elena had spent 2 days within its silent walls, the city's distant hum, a constant reminder of the life she couldn't access. Her patience, her routines, her meticulously ordered world. They called to her, a siren song of normalcy. She felt an urgent, primal need to do something, to reclaim her agency. Pacing the vast living room, she finally stopped before Salvatore, who was on a call, his voice a low, steady rumble, his attention seemingly elsewhere. "I need to go back," she stated, her voice cutting through the quiet efficiency of his conversation. He ended the call, his dark eyes, sharp and assessing, turning to her. "Back where, nurse?" "To the hospital. To work." Elena clarified, her chin lifting. "My patients need me. I have responsibilities, my safety protocols, the ones I'm fighting for. They don't write themselves from a penthouse." She hated the way it sounded, like a petulant demand. But the words were true. Her mission to make the hospital safe wasn't just a goal, it was a promise she'd made to herself, born from bitter experience. She wouldn't abandon it. Salvatore studied her, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He expected arguments, resistance, but not this unwavering dedication to a world so far removed from his own. He saw the strength in her commitment, the quiet fire beneath her professional calm. It wasn't a weakness, it was her core. An unfamiliar warmth stirred in him, a grudging respect that deepened the dangerous intrigue he felt. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a force. "That's impossible," he finally said, his voice flat. "Miller is still out there. You're a target." "Then I'll work remotely," Elena countered, already formulating a plan. "I can review charts, consult with colleagues, but I need to stay connected. If I disappear, it only makes me look guilty, or worse, weak. And it sends the message that the hospital isn't safe, that its staff can be silenced." Her eyes met his, a silent challenge passing between them. "My way of fighting." A beat of silence stretched. Salvatore looked at her, truly looked, and saw not just a woman he had rescued, but a woman of formidable will and unwavering purpose. She was not a possession to be protected, but a partner if he chose to see it. He saw the integrity that had intrigued him from the start, and an undeniable attraction, dark and potent, tightened its hold. "Fine," he conceded, the word a soft exhalation. "But every contact will be monitored, every email, every call, no physical visits. And if there's even a hint of danger, you cut off contact immediately. Understood?" Eleanor nodded, a small, triumphant surge of relief mixing with the persistent tension. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. She was taking back a piece of her life. Later that afternoon, the news channel Salvatore often watched, muted on a massive screen, suddenly flashed a familiar face, Officer Miller. The headline scrolled beneath him, "LAPD Officer Miller investigated for misconduct after downtown incident." Elena's blood ran cold. Misconduct, not assault, not attempted assault. The system was already trying to minimize it. She felt a sickening lurch in her gut. He was still free, still active, still dangerous. The report mentioned a minor altercation with a street vendor and a confidential complaint from a hospital worker. Her complaint, the one he'd dismissed as insufficient. Salvatore, who had been studying documents at a sleek, dark desk, looked up, his expression grim. "He's still making moves," he said, his voice a low growl, "trying to clean up his mess, or make a bigger one." The report continued, detailing how Miller's name had been connected to a recent string of unreported incidents involving small business owners in the arts district. Extortion, the anchor speculated carefully, without saying the word. A rival crew. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was a network, a spiderweb of corruption, and she was caught in it. Elena felt a fresh wave of fear, but also a hardening resolve. His tactics, his connections, his impunity, it was all laid bare. Salvatore's methods, his decisive force, could stop one instance as he had with the vendor, but it couldn't unravel this. It couldn't bring down an entire corrupt system. Her gaze drifted to the small black box on the shelf, the one containing Salvatore's dashcam SD card. He saw it as insufficient. She saw it as a critical piece of the puzzle, a physical anchor to the truth. His resources, his intelligence network, his understanding of the city's underbelly, combined with her meticulous mind, her knowledge of the official channels, her proof. Suddenly a new path forward, a shared vision, began to coalesce in her mind. His power, her precision, not vengeance, justice, a true lawful takedown that wouldn't just neutralize Miller, but dismantle his entire ring. It would be dangerous, terrifying even, but she knew with a fierce certainty that it was the only way. It was their way. The news report had been a slap to the face, a stark reminder of the enemy's power. Misconduct instead of assault. Elena's stomach churned with a mixture of fear and fury. Miller wasn't just a dirty cop, he was a symptom, a visible rot in a much larger, darker system. Salvatore had spent the morning on hushed calls, his voice a low, dangerous murmur from the other side of the vast apartment. When he finally ended a call, his face was set, grim. He walked towards Elena, his presence heavy, casting a long shadow across the polished floor. "It's worse than I thought," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, yet laced with an undeniable edge. Miller isn't just working with a few bad apples. He's a key piece in an extortion ring. They target small businesses, clinics, even some of the smaller hospitals, anyone who can't fight back. Elena felt a cold dread spread through her. Hospitals. Her hospital. "Extortion?" she whispered, the word tasting bitter. He nodded, his dark eyes fixed on the city sprawling beneath them. Protection money. They plant drugs, fabricate charges, threaten permits. Then, Miller or one of his crew offers a solution for a price. They've got handlers inside the department, men higher up pulling the strings. A rival crew wants a piece of their action, and Miller's been getting sloppy, attracting attention. The truth landed like a physical blow. Her personal nightmare in the garage wasn't an isolated incident, but a brutal intersection with a deep-seated criminal enterprise. Her initial fear of Miller had exploded into the terrifying realization that she was up against a network, a corrupt system that preyed on the vulnerable. This was the true war, far bigger than a single man's vengeance. This was exactly what she had feared, what she had warned Salvatore against. Her vision of a lawful takedown, once a desperate plea, now felt like the only possible weapon. "My God!" Elena breathed, clutching her arms, the phantom ache of Miller's grip returning. "They're preying on people, on businesses that serve the community, on hospitals." Her voice rose, raw with indignation. "This is what I meant, Salvatore. Your decisive force might stop one incident, but it won't stop this. It won't dismantle an entire ring of corrupt cops." Salvatore turned from the window, his gaze meeting hers, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. "You were right," he admitted, his voice rough. "My protective fury. It ignited a war, not with Miller alone, but with this whole network of dirty badges." He paused, a muscle ticking. In his jaw. "They despise me because I don't operate like them. I don't touch innocents, but they won't hesitate to use anyone to get to me, or to silence you." Elena swallowed, the weight of his words pressing down on her. He was acknowledging her fears, her initial warnings. He was seeing the true scope of the battle, and a strange, fragile bridge of understanding began to form between them. I have something," she confessed, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. It was time. The stakes were too high for secrets. "My HR complaint, the one I filed before, about the harassment at the hospital." Salvatore's eyebrows rose, a silent prompt. "It wasn't just about making a formal record," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. "It was about making the hospital safe. I've seen this before. Bullies, opportunists. I wanted to build a paper trail. I wanted to force them to implement new safety protocols, to protect staff and patients from any kind of threat, internal or external." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "It's about agency, about ensuring no one ever feels as helpless as I did, as my patients often do. This isn't just about Miller. It's about systemic change." A beat of silence stretched, thick with unspoken meaning. He saw the fierce integrity in her, the unwavering commitment to her purpose. He saw that her fight wasn't just for herself, but for the principle of safety, of justice. Suddenly, a sharp, insistent buzz echoed through the apartment. Salvatore's phone, a burner, vibrated on the polished table. He picked it up, his expression hardening. His words were terse, clipped, spoken in rapid Italian. Elena watched his jaw tighten, his eyes narrowing. He ended the call with a curt, "Capisco." "What is it?" she asked, her heart pounding. He looked at her, his eyes cold, dangerous. "Miller's crew. They just tried to access your old patient records at the hospital, claimed it was a routine audit. And someone was seen lurking outside your apartment building." Elena felt a fresh wave of ice-cold fear. Her past, her privacy, her last vestiges of normalcy, they were all under attack. They were closing in. This wasn't just a distant threat anymore. It was a direct, palpable attempt to find and silence her. Miller wasn't just investigating, he was hunting. Salvatore's hand slammed down on the table, a sudden, sharp crack that made Elena jump. His knuckles were white. "He wants to know what you know. He wants to know what you told HR. He wants to know if you're a problem." His voice was a low snarl, laced with barely contained fury. "They are actively trying to find you, nurse. They are trying to make you disappear." The words hung in the air, chilling and stark. Elena knew then, with absolute certainty, that they couldn't wait. The game had just escalated, and the only way out was through. Her HR complaint wasn't just a record of past harassment. It was a weapon, and Salvatore's rage, his resources, his dangerous world, they were no longer just a shield, but a necessary, terrifying alliance. Salvatore's hand, still resting on the table, clenched into a fist, the wood groaning faintly beneath his knuckles. His jaw was tight, a muscle ticking violently. The news that Miller's crew had tried to access Elena's patient records, that they'd been lurking outside the building, had ignited something primal and terrifying in him. Elena watched the transformation, a cold dread washing over her. He wasn't just angry, he was a storm gathering force. "They crossed the line," he growled, his voice low, guttural, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. His eyes, dark as obsidian, fixed on the city lights. But Elena knew he wasn't seeing the city. He was seeing red. "They want a war? I'll give them a war. I'll burn them to the ground, every last one of those dirty badges and their puppet masters." Elena felt a tremor run through her. This was the Salvatore she'd feared, the one whose power could bring down walls, but also bury innocence beneath the rubble. His protective fury, once a shield, was now a dangerous, volatile weapon. She saw the temptation in his eyes, the urge to unleash his full, decisive force, to make them pay in the only language he truly understood. "No," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the heavy air. She pushed herself to her feet, her own fear fighting against a fiercer resolve. "You won't. That's exactly what they want. More violence, more chaos. That's how they thrive, Salvatore. That's how they hide their corruption." He turned, his dark gaze piercing her, colder than she'd ever seen it. "And you think your way, your lawful takedown, will stop them? They are actively hunting you, Elena. They want to make you disappear. What good is a paper trail when you're gone?" "It's the only good," Elena countered, her voice rising, infused with a desperate conviction. "Your way, it makes them martyrs. It creates a cycle of vengeance. More innocents pay, more families suffer. It lets the real problem fester, deep inside the department, untouched. You want to dismantle the system, Salvatore? You don't do it with a gun. You do it with truth, with light." She took a step closer, her eyes locked on his, challenging him, pleading with him. "If you retaliate with violence, it gives them exactly what they need, an excuse. They'll paint you as the monster, and me as your accomplice. They'll bury us. Both. But if we expose them, lawfully, systematically, then the rot is cut out for good. My hospital will be safe. My patients will be safe. And your code, never against bystanders, will be upheld." He watched her, his fury still burning, but a flicker of something else, a grudging respect, began to temper it. He hated dirty cops, despised them. And Elena's way, though agonizingly slow, promised a deeper, more permanent solution than his own. "My HR complaint," Elena pressed, seizing the moment. "It's more than just my account of Miller's harassment. I was meticulous. I kept records. I was preparing for this, for a fight that wasn't just about me. There are details. Things that connect him to other incidents, other patterns, things that hint at his broader activities." She didn't reveal the audio file, not yet. The time wasn't right. But she needed him to understand the potential, the hidden power. Salvatore's eyes narrowed, a new calculation in their depths. He looked towards the small black box on the shelf, where his dashcam SD card rested, his own damning proof of Miller's actions. "My dashcam caught him red-handed in the garage," he rumbled almost to himself. "But it's one piece. They'll try to dismiss it. Combined, they won't be able to," Elena insisted, her heart pounding with a desperate hope. "Your dashcam proves the assault. My HR complaint ties him to a pattern, to a system. It's evidence, Salvatore, real evidence, not just muscle." A tense silence fell. Between them, thick and suffocating, he saw her conviction, her unwavering belief in her method. He saw the potential, yes, but also the agonizing risk. His instincts screamed for swift, decisive action. Her logic demanded patience, precision, a slow burn that could either expose or consume them both. "You want to play this game," Salvatore finally said, his voice flat, emotionless, "against a network of corrupt cops, with their handlers inside the department." He didn't question her intelligence or her resolve. He questioned her sanity. "You think you can win?" Elena met his gaze, unflinching. "I have to try, my way. This isn't just about my safety anymore, Salvatore. It's about making sure no one else has to go through this. I can't be another trophy in your war or a casualty in theirs. I need to do this my way, and if you can't support that—" Her voice trailed off, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. "Then I can't stay here." A muscle worked in Salvatore's jaw. He saw the line she was drawing, the boundary she refused to let him cross. He saw the fierce independence, the unyielding will. For a long moment he said nothing, his dark eyes studying her, a silent battle raging within him. He wanted to protect her, to lash out at those who threatened her, but she was asking him to trust her, to trust a path entirely alien to him, a path that risked everything. Finally, he turned away, walking towards the vast windows, his back to her. The city lights glittered, indifferent. "Then you prove it, Nurse Jensen," he said, his voice low, distant. "You prove your lawful takedown can work. But if it puts you in more danger, don't expect me to stand by and watch." Eleanor watched his retreating back, a cold knot forming in her stomach. He hadn't agreed. Not fully, but he hadn't outright refused. He was giving her space, a dangerous leash, to test her own theories. She knew this was a temporary rift, an emotional chasm opening between them. She had to show him. She had to prove her way was the right way, and if she failed, she knew exactly what kind of hell would break loose. She was on her own for now. And the weight of that responsibility, of that terrifying gamble, settled heavily on her shoulders. The morning news, usually a distant muted hum in Salvatore's opulent apartment, suddenly blared to life. Elena, pouring herself a glass of water, froze. Her face, her name, flashed across the screen, not as a victim, but distorted. The anchor, a woman with a perfectly coiffed smile, spoke of unsubstantiated claims and a troubled nurse with a history of internal complaints. Officer Miller, looking impeccably professional in his uniform, appeared briefly, denying any wrongdoing, expressing concern for Elena's mental well-being. Elena's blood ran cold. They were trying to discredit her, to paint her as unstable, vindictive, a liar. It was a vicious, calculated attack designed to undermine her credibility before she could even speak. The hospital, under pressure, had released a vague statement about an ongoing internal review, effectively throwing her to the wolves. Her stomach churned, a sickening wave of betrayal washing over her. This wasn't just about Miller anymore. It was about the entire corrupt system trying to silence her. Salvatore, who had been on a call in rapid Italian, ended it abruptly, his dark eyes fixed on the screen, then on Elena. His face was a mask of granite, but a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. He'd warned her. He'd seen this coming. "They're trying to make you disappear without touching you," he said, his voice a low growl. "Make you toxic. Unbelievable." Elena clenched her hands, her knuckles white. Disappear. Not physically, but professionally, personally. Her meticulous life, her reputation, her entire identity as a dedicated nurse, it was all being dismantled piece by piece. Fury, cold and precise, began to replace the fear. She wouldn't be a victim. Not again. She turned away from the screen, her gaze sweeping the vast apartment, then landed on her worn canvas bag, still sitting by the door. Inside, she knew, were the meticulous records she always kept. Her personal copies of her HR complaint, detailed notes, dates, names, even a few subtle observations about Miller's activities that she'd logged for her own peace of mind. She was a nurse. Precision was her nature. "I need my files," she stated, her voice steady, resolute. "My personal records. Everything. I've documented." Salvatore simply watched her, his expression unreadable. He saw the fire in her eyes, the defiance that refused to break. He saw her turning the attack into fuel, channeling her anger into action. A flicker of reluctant admiration crossed his face. He pointed to a sleek, secure laptop on a nearby desk. "Use this. It's clean, untraceable." He didn't question her, didn't try to stop her. He was offering a tool, a resource, a silent acknowledgement of her strategy. Elena nodded, a silent thanks passing between them. She retrieved her bag, her fingers brushing against the familiar weight of her visitor's badge still clipped to her scrubs. It felt heavy, Suddenly, not just a hospital pass, but a target, a symbol of her vulnerability, yet also her access. If they were attacking her professional identity, then that badge was a key, both to her past and to her fight. She would need to protect it, and perhaps use it. Hours later, hunched over the glowing screen, Elena delved into her own history. She wasn't just reviewing the HR complaint about Miller, she was cross-referencing, building a timeline, connecting the dots. She found a pattern of minor incidents she'd previously dismissed: strange equipment malfunctions, missing supplies, unusual changes in shift schedules that always seemed to coincide with certain individuals. Little things that, viewed through the lens of Miller's extortion ring, suddenly took on sinister meaning. He was testing the waters, finding weaknesses. She worked tirelessly, the analytical part of her mind taking over, finding comfort in the logic of data, the cold, hard facts. Salvatore watched her from across the room, sometimes making a quiet call, sometimes simply observing. He saw her focus, her unwavering dedication, the quiet storm raging beneath her calm exterior. He saw her building a case, brick by meticulous brick, with a methodical precision that surprised him. She wasn't just reacting, she was strategizing. He hated the slow pace, the legalistic dance. His instincts screamed for a swift, decisive strike, but as he watched Elena, he began to see the insidious power of her method. His way would create a vacuum, inviting another Miller. Her way, if successful, could expose the rot from within, dismantling the entire network. He despised dirty cops, but he knew his own methods, however effective, would only fuel the narrative of him being the monster. Elena's approach offered a way to dismantle them without crossing his own code against harming bystanders, without turning his protective fury into destructive vengeance. He still didn't trust the system, not entirely, but he was starting to trust her. Elena paused, rubbing her temples. She'd found it. A pattern of unexplained audits and inspections affecting small clinics and businesses around the hospital. The same businesses that Miller's crew had been extorting, and almost always the inspector's name was redacted or the report was filed under a generic department header, but she'd noticed a tiny recurring detail in the metadata of the digital files. A unique file naming convention, a specific date format that only she and a few others in her department used for internal documents. It was almost imperceptible. She had stumbled upon it by accident, meticulously organizing her own digital archives. Her heart hammered. It wasn't just about her HR complaint anymore. This was a wider network, and her own meticulousness had just given her a ghost of a trail. The visitor's badge, still clipped to her scrubs, felt like a burning beacon. It wasn't just a target, it was a key, a way back in. She had to confirm this. She needed to access the hospital's internal server, not just her own copies, to pull the original files. It was a risky move, but she knew, with a fierce certainty, that this was the lever she needed. This was her agency. This was her fight. The morning after Miller's smear campaign, Elena felt a cold, hard clarity settle over her. The fear was still there, a constant hum beneath her skin, but it was tempered by a fierce, unyielding resolve. They wanted to discredit her, to silence her. She wouldn't let them. Salvatore had given her a dangerous leash, a chance to prove her way. She wouldn't waste it. She found him in the vast living room, staring out at the city, a dark, imposing silhouette against the morning light. He turned as she approached, his eyes sharp, questioning. "I have a plan," Elena stated, her voice steady, devoid of the tremor she felt inside. She didn't ask for his permission. She presented a strategy. "You're right. My HR complaint alone won't be enough. Your dashcam footage alone won't be enough. But combined and amplified, they can expose the entire ring. Salvatore's eyebrows lifted, a silent challenge. Amplify how, Nurse Jensen? Irrefutable evidence presented through official channels, with public oversight, Elena explained, her mind racing, connecting all the threads. My HR complaint contained more than just my account of Miller's harassment. I included subtle details, patterns I'd observed, dates of suspicious audits and inspections at small clinics and businesses around the hospital. I found a hidden metadata trail connecting those to Miller's crew. Salvatore's gaze sharpened, a flicker of genuine interest in his dark eyes. Metadata? Yes. A specific file naming convention. It's almost imperceptible, but it links those audits to his network. It proves this isn't an isolated incident. This is an extortion ring, operating under the guise of law enforcement. Eleanor pulled out a small, encrypted flash drive she'd quietly prepared on the secure laptop. I've already compiled what I have. But we need more. We need to go public, but carefully. We need a civil rights attorney, someone who isn't afraid to take on corrupt cops, who understands the system and how to use it against itself. He listened, his expression unreadable, but Elena felt a shift in the air, a subtle softening of his granite resolve. He was still a man of action, but her words, her meticulousness, were clearly getting through. An attorney, Salvatore mused, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. You think a lawyer can fight an entire dirty network that has the department in its pocket? A good civil rights attorney can, Elena countered, holding his gaze. They know how to navigate internal affairs, how to get the press involved without it being dismissed as sensationalism. They know how to build a case that even the highest-up handlers can't ignore. Your dashcam footage provides the undeniable visual proof of Miller's assault. My HR complaint, with the metadata, provides the paper trail, linking him to the larger extortion scheme. Together, it's a hammer, but we need a hand to wield it legally. A long silence stretched between them. Eleanor felt the weight of his decision, the immense power he held. He could dismiss her, revert to his own brutal methods, or he could listen. My way, she reiterated, her voice firm. This is a lawful takedown, Salvatore. No more violence, no more innocents paying the price. Just justice. She added, almost as an afterthought, but with deep meaning, you hate dirty cops. This is how we truly dismantle them, not just lop off a head. He looked at her then, truly looked, and Elena saw not just the dangerous boss, but the man beneath, the one who held a fierce code, who despised injustice when it preyed on the vulnerable. He saw her unwavering dedication, her unwavering integrity, and he saw a partner, not a trophy. All right, Nurse Jensen, Salvatore finally said, his voice a low rumble, a reluctant but definite agreement. You lead the lawful takedown. I'll give you the resources. My network knows every attorney in this city, good and bad, and my protection will ensure you get to speak your truth. He paused, his dark eyes intense. But if this plan puts you in more danger than it saves, I make the call. Understood. Elena nodded, a surge of relief so profound it almost buckled her knees. It was a terrifying alliance, a perilous gamble, but it was their gamble. He was giving her agency, respect, and his formidable support. First, we need to identify the handlers, Elena said, her mind already shifting into investigative mode. The ones pulling Miller's strings within the department. My metadata hints at connections, but your intelligence network, your understanding of how this city's underbelly works, that will be crucial. Salvatore nodded, a plan already forming in his eyes. My people have been looking into Miller's movements, his contacts. His crew isn't as subtle as they think. We'll cross-reference what you have with what we've gathered. Every whisper, every transaction, every dirty cop he's met with, we'll find their names." And so their unlikely partnership began. Elena, with her meticulous mind and unwavering moral compass, sat at the secure laptop, building timelines, cross-referencing data, pulling apart the digital threads of corruption. Salvatore, with his vast network and his intuitive understanding of power, made calls, dispatched men, and pieced together the real-world connections. The vast, luxurious apartment became their war room, the city sprawling beneath them, waiting for the truth they were forging piece by painstaking piece. The corrupt cop's extortion ring, once a shadowy, untouchable entity, slowly began to take shape, its structure and its handlers revealing themselves in the growing pile of evidence. They were building a case, not just for justice, but for systemic change. The city lights blurred outside the penthouse windows, a million distant eyes watching an approaching storm. Elena sat hunched over the secure laptop, the screen a stark white against the deepening twilight. She and Salvatore had spent the last 2 days meticulously cross-referencing, piecing together the skeletal structure of Miller's extortion ring. His network had provided names, locations, whispered intel. Her meticulous mind had found patterns, digital breadcrumbs in the metadata of official-looking documents. They had a picture, terrifyingly clear, of the corrupt cops and their handlers inside the department. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. They needed an undeniable blow, something to make the entire rotten structure collapse. Salvatore stood by the windows, a silent, imposing guardian. He hadn't questioned her methods since their agreement, but the tension radiating from him was palpable. Elena knew his patience wore thin with every passing minute of inaction, every delay in the lawful takedown. He trusted her, yes, but his instincts still screamed for raw, decisive force. She took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it. The moment she'd held back, the last, most crucial piece of her defense, the one she'd kept buried even from herself until the stakes were truly life or death. Until she knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Salvatore would use it for justice, not vengeance. "Salvatore," she said, her voice quiet, cutting through the silence. He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers, a silent question in their depths. Elena looked at him, truly looked, and saw the dangerous man who had saved her, but also the man who had listened, who had honored her code, who hated dirty cops as much as she did. She took the leap. "My HR complaint," she began, her voice gaining strength. It contained more than just my account of Miller's harassment and the metadata trail I showed you. His eyebrows lifted slightly, a flicker of intrigue. "I was thorough," Elena continued, a ghost of a bitter smile on her lips. "I've faced harassment before, Salvatore. I know how easily things get dismissed, how quickly victims get silenced. So I prepared. I always prepare." She reached for her cracked phone, still sitting on the desk, a constant physical reminder of that terrifying night. The screen, shattered in the corner, still functioned. She tapped a few times, navigating to a hidden folder she'd only ever accessed in moments of extreme caution. "I had a feeling about Miller. I started recording him subtly, weeks before the garage incident." Salvatore's eyes narrowed, a slow understanding dawning. "The night in the garage," Elena explained, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "When my phone dropped, the recording app was still running. It captured everything. Not just him assaulting me, but his words. He talked about his crew, about making examples, about the big boss who would clean up any messes. He even hinted at payoffs, at internal protection for their extortion racket." She looked up, her gaze firm. "It's a hidden audio file, Salvatore. It implicates him not just in my harassment, but in his broader criminal activities, his connections, his handlers." A stunned silence filled the vast room. Salvatore stared at her, his usual impassive mask. Momentarily cracking, surprise, then a slow, dawning comprehension flickered in his dark eyes. He hadn't just rescued a nurse, he had rescued a formidable, meticulous strategist who had been quietly building her own case all along. His respect for her, already significant, deepened profoundly. "An audio file?" he repeated, the words a low rumble, almost a whisper. He moved towards her, his presence suddenly overwhelming but not threatening. He simply stood, looking at her, absorbing the weight of her confession, the immense risk she had taken and the power she now held. Elena nodded, her heart pounding. "Combined with your dashcam footage of the assault, it's irrefutable. His words, his actions, all captured. It's an undeniable case against him and his network. His big boss, his handlers, they're all implicated by his own arrogance." A slow, dangerous smile, devoid of humor, spread across Salvatore's face. It was the smile of a predator who had just been handed the perfect weapon. His eyes burned with a cold, triumphant fire. "My dashcam, your audio," he murmured, the words tasting like victory. "You were right, Nurse Jensen. This is how we dismantle them. Not just with muscle, but with truth." His code, never against bystanders, was not just upheld, but amplified. Her evidence was the lever, and he would provide the fulcrum. The revelation of the audio file had shifted everything. The air between them crackled with a new energy, a shared purpose that forged a deeper, more dangerous bond. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about tearing down a corrupt empire together. The immense risk was clear, but the potential for true, lasting justice overshadowed it all. "Now," Elena said, her voice steady, "we need to lay the groundwork. We need that civil rights attorney, and we need reporters. Not just any reporters, but ones known for their integrity, for exposing corruption, not just sensationalizing it." Salvatore nodded, his dark eyes gleaming. "My network has connections, people who know who to trust in the legal world and in the media. We'll find the best, the ones who won't back down." He moved to a nearby phone, making a series of terse, rapid calls in Italian, his instructions precise, his tone unwavering. Elena watched, a silent partner in this terrifying, exhilarating dance. With Salvatore's quiet support, Elena meticulously drafted a summary of their combined evidence, a compelling narrative to present to the attorney. She researched prominent civil rights lawyers, focusing on their track record against police corruption. She even began to compile a list of journalists known for their investigative prowess. The vast apartment, once a cage, now felt like a command center, humming with their shared resolve. The plan was in motion, the trap was being set. Elena felt the shift in the air, a subtle but undeniable tightening of the noose. The corrupt cops, Miller's handlers, knew something was coming. They were scrambling, frantic to cover their tracks, desperate to find the source of the leak. Salvatore's network, a web of whispers and shadows, picked up on their panic. They were making desperate moves, clumsy now, no longer subtle. "They're looking for you," Salvatore said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, but Elena felt the controlled fury simmering beneath. They were in the secure apartment, but the illusion of safety felt thinner than usual. "They're checking every known contact, every previous address. They're trying to find your weakness, your vulnerability." Elena's stomach clenched. She knew what that meant. They weren't just searching, they were hunting. Her meticulous records, the audio file on her cracked phone, the dashcam footage, they were too close to the truth. The net was closing, but it was a two-way street. "What kind of moves?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Aggressive, reckless," Salvatore replied, his gaze sweeping the city below. "They raided a small clinic in Little Tokyo this morning. One we suspect was being extorted. Claimed they had a warrant for drug possession. Found nothing. But they terrified the staff, destroyed equipment. They're trying to intimidate, to send a message." A cold wave washed over Elena. Innocent people, her patients, her colleagues. They were being targeted, used as pawns in this dirty game. It fueled her resolve, hardening her spine. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about everyone Miller's crew had terrorized. "They're desperate," she stated, more to herself than to him. "That means we're getting close." Salvatore nodded slowly. "Too close for their comfort. Which means you're in more danger than ever." That night, the danger became terrifyingly real. They were on the move, a necessary trip from the secure apartment to a discreet meeting point with the civil rights attorney. Salvatore insisted on taking a route through the downtown tunnels, a labyrinth of concrete and darkness, a path less traveled by prying eyes. Elena sat in the passenger seat, the city lights a blur above them, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Her cracked phone, the precious audio file nestled within, was clutched in her hand. Suddenly, Salvatore's comms crackled, a frantic voice speaking rapid Italian, his jaw tightened. He swore under his breath, a low, dangerous sound. "We have company," he stated, his voice clipped. "2 vehicles. Closing fast." Elena's heart leapt into her throat. She looked behind them, but the tunnel was a winding, dark maw. She saw nothing but shadows. Then, blinding headlights flashed in the rearview mirror, growing rapidly. Not 1 car, but 2, their engines roaring, echoing ominously in the confined space. "Miller!" Elena whispered, her blood running cold. "He found us!" Salvatore didn't answer. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The black SUV, a beast of power, surged forward, its engine responding with a guttural growl. The chase was on. The tunnel became a blur of concrete walls and flashing lights. Salvatore drove with a chilling precision, weaving through the sparse late-night traffic, expertly navigating the tight turns. He wasn't trying to outrun them completely. He was maneuvering, positioning. Elena felt every jolt, every surge, her body pressed against the seat. Her breath hitched as a dark sedan, one of Miller's crew, tried to cut them off, slamming dangerously close to their side. "Hold on!" Salvatore commanded, his voice a low rumble. He swerved sharply, narrowly avoiding a collision, the tires squealing in protest. The pursuing car scraped against the tunnel wall, sparks flying. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She saw the glint of a gun in the hand of a man in the passenger seat of the second car, hanging out the window. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but then a cold, fierce resolve took root. This was it. This was the moment. She would not break. "They're going to force us to stop," she gasped, her eyes darting between the road and Salvatore's grim profile. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he made another sudden, unexpected turn, plunging them deeper into a darker, narrower section of the tunnels, a forgotten artery beneath the city. The pursuing vehicles, caught off guard, hesitated for a split second. That was all Salvatore needed. He slammed on the brakes, not violently, but with a controlled precision that brought the SUV to a screeching halt. The following cars, expecting them to continue, nearly rear-ended them, swerving wildly to avoid a pile-up. He had boxed them in momentarily. Salvatore was out of the car before Elena could process it. He moved with a terrifying speed, a blur of dark power. Elena watched, her breath caught in her throat as he approached the lead car. The men inside, startled, fumbled for their weapons, but Salvatore wasn't reaching for a gun. He moved with an almost surgical grace, a series of quick, brutal movements. A precisely placed kick to the tire, deflating it with a sharp hiss. A swift, powerful yank on the driver's door, twisting it off its hinges with a sickening shriek of metal, rendering the car useless. He didn't touch the men, didn't strike them, didn't pull a weapon. He simply incapacitated their vehicle, making escape impossible. The second car, seeing their lead disabled, tried to reverse, but Salvatore was already there, a silent, imposing guardian. He slammed his hand against the hood, a warning. His dark eyes, colder than any ice, met the terrified gaze of the driver. He spoke a few rapid words in Italian, a low, menacing growl that Elena couldn't understand, but whose intent was clear: stand down or face me. The men, paralyzed by his sheer presence, by the raw, contained power radiating from him, froze. They knew he could have killed them easily, but he hadn't. He had shown restraint, adhering to the very code he'd agreed to. Follow. Elena, still trembling, watched it all. He had protected her, he had neutralized the threat, and he had done it without crossing the line, without resorting to lethal force, without creating more innocents who would pay. His promise, his commitment to her way, even in the face of deadly danger. Her cracked phone, still clutched in her hand, had been recording the entire terrifying encounter. Not just the sounds, but a brief, shaky video of Salvatore's controlled, precise actions. Another layer of proof, another piece of the puzzle. Salvatore returned to the SUV, his face impassive, his breathing steady, as if he'd just taken a leisurely stroll. He met Elena's wide, shocked eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. Elena could only nod, tears pricking at her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization of what he had just done. He had trusted her. He had shown her a depth of integrity she hadn't dared to hope for. "They won't be following us," he stated. Starting the engine, the SUV purred back to life, the disabled cars of Miller's crew now just wreckage in the rearview mirror. The rest of the drive was silent, but the silence was different now. It was filled with a new understanding, a solidified trust. He had proved he could operate within her moral boundaries. She had seen his code in action. Their partnership, forged in the crucible of danger, felt stronger, more resolute than ever. The city lights, when they finally emerged from the tunnels, no longer seemed distant and uncaring. They felt like a beacon, a shared path in the darkness. Elena spread the detailed schematics of the downtown tunnel across the sleek, dark table. Every entrance, every shadowed alcove, every potential escape route was marked. Mr. Davies, the civil rights attorney, a man with a sharp mind and an even sharper suit, leaned in, tracing a finger along the proposed routes. Elena's voice was tight with focus as she outlined the plan. She had spent hours with Salvatore's network, mapping out sightlines, pinpointing blind spots, accounting for every variable. Her meticulousness, usually reserved for delicate patient care, was now fully weaponized, orchestrating a complex, dangerous trap. Her cracked phone, nestled carefully beside her, held the precious audio file, the silent hammer blow. Getting internal affairs on board had been the hardest, most painstaking negotiation. Mr. Davies's formidable reputation, combined with Eleanor's irrefutable evidence, the dashcam footage, the intricate metadata trail, and the chilling summary of the audio file, had finally broken through their skepticism. She had presented the case with a surgeon's precision, leaving no room for doubt, no crack for denial. IA promised agents, discreetly positioned, ready to move in at the precise moment. Elena felt a surge of cold satisfaction, but it was quickly overshadowed by a profound, trembling terror. This was real. This was happening. The weight of official involvement, the lives that now hinged on her plan, settled heavily on her shoulders. Salvatore watched from the panoramic window, his back to them, a dark, imposing silhouette against the glittering city lights. Elena felt his restless energy, the coiled power barely contained. He hadn't interfered, hadn't questioned her strategy, but she knew the waiting gnawed at him. His world was about immediate action, decisive force. This slow, agonizing dance with the legal system, this reliance on words and evidence must have chafed him profoundly, yet he stayed. He provided the resources, the protection, the silent, unwavering support. His deep-seated hatred for dirty cops, for those who preyed on the vulnerable, was a powerful anchor, solidifying his resolve to stand by her plan, however alien it felt. Their eyes met across the room for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement of the terrifying leap of faith they were taking together. The bait was simple, insidious. A carefully orchestrated leak, a whisper spread through Miller's network, hinting at a compromised stash house, a location known to be used by the rival crew, but one that Miller's team also frequented for their illicit activities. The anonymous tip, designed to seem like a disgruntled member of the rival crew, would suggest that the stash contained not just a fortune in dirty money, but highly incriminating files on Miller's own operation, evidence that could dismantle his entire ring. The lure was irresistible, a chance for Miller and his handlers to eliminate a rival, secure their illegal profits, and crucially, retrieve any evidence that could tie them to the bigger picture. They would be walking into their own trap, blinded by greed and desperation, in the very downtown tunnel where Salvatore had protected her. Midnight, the downtown tunnel. Everything hinged on the precise timing, the flawless execution. Elena's heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the city. The sting was set. Midnight hung heavy in the downtown tunnel, thick with the scent of exhaust, damp concrete, and a chilling, anticipatory silence. Elena stood in the designated spot, a precise point marked on the schematics, the cold, rough wall pressing against her back. The weak, flickering overhead lights cast long, distorted shadows that danced like spectres, amplifying the frantic thump of her own heart. Every echo, every distant hum of traffic scraped at her raw nerves. Mr. Davies, the civil rights attorney, a calming presence despite the imminent danger, stood a few feet behind her, his gaze steady. Further down, at the far exit, she knew the reporters were positioned, their cameras ready, their questions poised. This was it. The trap was set. Her hands, clammy and trembling, clutched her cracked phone. The tiny device, a symbol of her violated peace, now held the key to their justice, the hidden audio file, a damning record of Miller's own words. She could feel the weight of Salvatore's presence nearby, a silent, powerful anchor in the suffocating darkness. He was a shadow among shadows, his sharp eyes scanning, his body coiled, ready. He was holding the line as he'd promised, without crossing it. His very stillness was a weapon, a palpable threat to anyone who dared to move against her. Then the low thrum of engines grew louder, closer. Headlights, blinding and arrogant, swung into the tunnel, cutting through the gloom. Two black SUVs, sleek and ominous, identical to the one Salvatore drove, pulled to a halt, boxing her in. The doors opened in eerie synchronicity. First, Miller. His swagger was back, a cruel sneer twisting his lips as he spotted Eleanor. Behind him, three other men emerged, their faces grim, their movements confident. These were his handlers, the big bosses Elena had meticulously uncovered. The air thickened, heavy with their predatory intent. Miller stepped forward, his eyes glinting with a dangerous triumph. "Well, well, nurse. Jensen, looking a little lost, aren't we? Did your mobster boyfriend abandon you?" He gestured to her phone. "Hand it over, sweetheart. This little game of yours is over." Elena's heart hammered, a frantic bird trapped in her ribs. But her voice, when it came, was steady, a clear, unwavering blade in the tension-filled air. "It's over, Miller, but not for me. For you." His sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a cold, calculating anger. "What are you talking about, you stupid bitch? You think you can blackmail us?" He took another step, his hand already reaching for her. "I'm talking about justice, Officer Miller," Elena countered, her voice gaining strength, echoing faintly in the concrete cavern. She didn't flinch, didn't back away. "I'm talking about your extortion ring, about the small businesses you've bled dry, about the clinics you've terrorized, about your handlers, Captain Ramirez and Detective Shaw." She named them, her gaze sweeping over the two men who now stood rigid, their faces paling in the dim light. "And I'm talking about how you tried to assault me in this very garage, believing you were untouchable." Miller froze, his hand dropping. His eyes, seconds ago filled with contempt, now darted wildly between Elena, the attorney, and the shadows where Salvatore waited. His bravado was visibly crumbling. "What? What are you talking about? None of that is true. She's hysterical, Captain, I told you." "It's all true," Elena interrupted, holding up her cracked phone. "And I have it all, Miller. Not just my HR complaint, not just the metadata trail connecting you to those audits and inspections, not just Salvatore's dashcam footage of you attacking me that night." She pressed a button on her phone. A low hum filled the tunnel, then, unmistakably, Miller's own gravelly voice, distorted slightly but chillingly clear, began to play. "Making examples. Big boss. Clean up any messes. Payoffs. Internal protection for their extortion. Racket." The voice filled the tunnel, damning, irrefutable. Miller's face went ashen. His eyes, wide with a terrifying realization, snapped to the phone, then to Elena, then to his handlers, who now looked less like confident superiors and more like cornered rats. The words of his own arrogance, his own depravity, echoed back at him, a death knell in the silence. You recorded me?" he choked out, his voice hoarse, disbelief warring with a dawning horror. He lunged, a desperate, frantic movement, not for Elena, but for the phone, for the evidence that was destroying his world. But Salvatore, a powerful, silent presence nearby, was faster. He didn't move towards Miller, didn't lay a hand on him. He simply shifted, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, placing his formidable body directly between Miller and Elena. He didn't cross the line, didn't resort to violence, but his message was clear. Touch her, and you die. His dark eyes, colder than the concrete walls, burned into Miller's, a promise of swift, lethal retribution if he dared to take another step. Miller skidded to a halt, terror replacing the desperation in his eyes. He saw the fury in Salvatore's stance, the coiled power, and knew that any further move would be his last. He was exposed, cornered. His bravado had vanished, replaced by a raw, naked fear. The silent standoff stretched, thick with unspoken threats, the low hum of Miller's recorded voice fading into the tense, echoing silence of the tunnel. Elena felt a profound, chilling vindication. She had done it. She had held the line, and the truth, finally, had nowhere left to hide. Miller's eyes, wide and wild with a terrifying realization, snapped from Salvatore to Elena, then to the phone that still echoed his damning words. His world was collapsing, and he knew it. Logic abandoned him, replaced by a desperate animalistic need to destroy the evidence. With a guttural roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury and despair, he lunged, not in for Elena, but for the cracked phone in her hand, the small device that had just sealed his fate. But Salvatore was faster, a blur of controlled power. He didn't strike, didn't throw a punch. He moved with the precision of a predator, a swift, almost imperceptible shift of his formidable body. His arms snaked out, not to hit Miller, but to intercept his lunge, twisting the officer's momentum, redirecting his force. Miller stumbled, off balance, his desperate grab for the phone missing its target. By inches, Salvatore's other hand, a steel vice, clamped down on Miller's wrist, twisting it sharply, not breaking it, but forcing a gasp of pain from the corrupt cop. He held Miller suspended, unbalanced, his feet barely touching the ground, utterly neutralized. It was decisive, effective, and completely non-lethal. He had held the line. "Internal affairs! Drop your weapons! You are all under arrest!" The tunnel suddenly exploded with activity. Sirens, muted until now, blared from both ends. Flashlights, blinding and precise, cut through the gloom. From the shadows and hidden alcoves, figures in dark suits and tactical gear swarmed into the tunnel, their movements swift and coordinated. IA, they had arrived. Eleanor felt a dizzying wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled her knees. The weight of the world, the suffocating fear, began to lift, replaced by a profound, trembling vindication. She clutched her phone, her knuckles white, watching as Miller, still held in Salvatore's iron grip, writhed uselessly, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. Captain Ramirez and Detective Shaw, their faces ashen, were already being cuffed, their earlier bravado shattered. An internal affairs agent, a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes, moved directly towards Elena. "Nurse Jensen, I'm Agent Davies. We need your phone, please." Elena, her hand still trembling, carefully extended the cracked phone. Agent Davies took it with a pair of gloved hands, placing it gently into an evidence bag. Another agent approached Salvatore. "Mr. Mancini, we'll need the dashcam SD card." Salvatore released Miller, who collapsed to the ground, whimpering. He reached into the small black box in his SUV, retrieving the tiny SD card. He handed it over without a word, his dark eyes still scanning the tunnel, ensuring Elena's safety even as the chaos unfolded. His job wasn't over until she was truly safe. "Move him out!" a voice barked, and Miller was roughly pulled to his feet, his uniform now disheveled, his sneer replaced by a pathetic snivel. As he was led away, his eyes met Elena's one last time. There was no anger, no threat, only the hollow, utterly defeated gaze of a man whose power had just been stripped bare. Then, from the far end of the tunnel, a new wave of flashes erupted. The reporters, their cameras clicked and whirred, illuminating the scene, capturing the arrests, the evidence, the fall of a corrupt network. Microphones were thrust forward, questions shouted into the echoing space. "Officer Miller, are these allegations true?" "Captain Ramirez, what do you have to say about the extortion ring?" "Nurse Jensen, how did you expose them?" Eleanor felt a surge of exhaustion, bone-deep and overwhelming. But beneath it, a powerful, quiet triumph bloomed. Justice, not vengeance, but true, undeniable justice, delivered through the very system they had tried to corrupt. Her hospital would be safe. Her patients would be safe. The rot was being cut out for good. Salvatore, a silent, imposing presence, stepped closer to her, his body a shield against the encroaching media. He didn't speak, didn't touch her, but his presence was a solid, unwavering testament to their shared success. Elena looked at him, truly looked, and saw the man who had honored her code, who had protected her without crossing his own lines, who had understood that true strength sometimes lay not in brute force, but in the meticulous pursuit of truth. His dark eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them, a profound acknowledgement of the perilous journey they had just completed together. The immediate threat was neutralized. The war was won, Elena's way. The days that followed were a blur of flashing cameras, urgent phone calls, and the relentless hum of news cycles. Elena watched it all unfold from the quiet sanctuary of Salvatore's penthouse, the city below a kaleidoscope of headlines and breaking stories. The extortion ring collapsed. Miller, Captain. Ramirez, Detective Shaw, all of them exposed, their faces plastered across every screen, their corruption laid bare for the world to see. Internal affairs, spurred by the irrefutable evidence Elena had meticulously gathered, and Salvatore's dashcam footage, launched a full-scale investigation that ripped through the department like wildfire, leading to more arrests, more resignations. It was a cleansing, brutal, and necessary, and it was entirely because of her. Justice. Lawful. Undeniable. A justice. She had done it. Her hospital, initially defensive and embarrassed, was forced to confront its own vulnerabilities. The public outcry was immense. But amidst the chaos, Eleanor Jensen emerged as a reluctant hero. The same news channels that had tried to discredit her now hailed her as a courageous whistleblower. The hospital administration, with nowhere left to hide, not only adopted her proposed safety protocol but, in a landmark decision, appointed her to lead its development and implementation. Director of Hospital Safety and Integrity. The title felt heavy, powerful, real. Her long-standing goal, her quiet, unwavering mission, was finally realized. This place, her sanctuary, would truly be safe. Salvatore watched her from the periphery, a silent, formidable presence. He hadn't sought the spotlight, disappearing back into the shadows as swiftly as he'd appeared. But his victory was no less profound. He had avoided an all-out war, a bloody conflict that would have claimed innocence. He had achieved justice against his enemies, dismantled a corrupt network that preyed on the weak, and he had done it all without sacrificing his code, without crossing his lines. His reputation, once whispered as a dangerous force, was now affirmed as a principled one. He was a man of his word, even when that word meant allowing a nurse to lead the charge. One evening, as the city lights began to prickle through the twilight, Elena found him by the vast windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. The news played silently on a distant screen, showing a triumphant shot of the hospital, a banner unfurled across its facade. Safety first, led by Elena Jensen. He turned as she approached, his dark eyes meeting hers. There was no fanfare, no congratulations, just a quiet, intense gaze that seemed to see straight into her soul. Eleanor felt the weight of their shared journey, the profound, terrifying path they had walked together. "You did it," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of surprise but thick with an undeniable respect. "Your way." Elena nodded, a soft, weary smile touching her lips. "Our way. Your resources, my proof. Your protection, my plan." She looked at him, truly looked, at the scars that spoke of a different kind of war, at the eyes that had seen too much darkness. "You held the line, Salvatore. You trusted me." A corner of his mouth twitched, a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture that might have been a smile. "I learned that some fights are best won with a scalpel, not a sword, Nurse Jensen." He paused, his gaze softening, a warmth creeping into the dark depths of his eyes that made Elena's breath catch. "You are no trophy, Elena. You are a force." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, with battles fought and won, with trust earned in the crucible of fear and defiance. Elena felt a strange, thrilling warmth spread through her, a recognition, a connection that transcended their vastly different worlds. He had seen her, truly seen her for who she was, and she, in turn, had seen the man beneath the monster, the dangerous integrity that defined him. The foundation of earned trust was evident, a silent understanding passing between them, deeper than any words. They had faced down a corrupt world and they had won. Together. The city glittered outside, a new chapter waiting to be written. The days that followed were a blur of flashing cameras, urgent phone calls, and the relentless hum of news. Cycles. Elena watched it all unfold from the quiet sanctuary of Salvatore's penthouse, the city below a kaleidoscope of headlines and breaking stories. The extortion ring collapsed. Miller, Captain Ramirez, Detective Shaw, all of them exposed, their faces plastered across every screen, their corruption laid bare for the world to see. Internal affairs, spurred by the irrefutable evidence Elena had meticulously gathered and Salvatore's dashcam footage, launched a full-scale investigation that ripped through the department like wildfire, leading to more arrests, more resignations. It was a cleansing, brutal, and necessary, and it was entirely because of her. Justice. Lawful, undeniable justice. She had done it. Her hospital, initially defensive and embarrassed, was forced to confront its own vulnerabilities. The public outcry was immense. But amidst the chaos, Elena Jensen emerged as a reluctant hero. The same news channels that had tried to discredit her now hailed her as a courageous whistleblower. The hospital administration, with nowhere left to hide, not only adopted her proposed safety protocol, but, in a landmark decision, appointed her to lead its development and implementation. Director of Hospital Safety and Integrity. The title felt heavy, powerful, real. Her long-standing goal, her quiet, unwavering mission, was finally realized. This place, her sanctuary, would truly be safe. Salvatore watched her from the periphery, a silent, formidable presence. He hadn't sought the spotlight, disappearing back into the shadows as swiftly as he'd appeared. But his victory was no less profound. He had avoided an all-out war, a bloody conflict that would have claimed innocence. He had achieved justice against his enemies, dismantled a corrupt network that preyed on the weak, and he had done it all without sacrificing his code, without crossing his lines. His reputation, once whispered as a dangerous force, was now affirmed as a principled one. He was a man of his word, even when that word meant allowing a nurse to lead the charge. One evening, as the city lights began to prickle through the twilight, Elena found him by the vast windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. The news played silently on a distant screen, showing a triumphant shot of the hospital, a banner unfurled across its facade. Safety first, led by Elena Jensen. He turned as she approached, his dark eyes meeting hers. There was no fanfare, no congratulations, just a quiet, intense gaze that seemed to see straight into her soul. Elena felt the weight of their shared journey, the profound, terrifying path they had walked together. "You did it," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of surprise, but thick with an undeniable respect. "Your way." Elena nodded, a soft, weary smile touching her lips. "Our way. Your resources, my proof. Your protection, my plan." She looked at him, truly looked, at the scars that spoke of a different kind of war, at the eyes that had seen too much. Darkness. "You held the line, Salvatore. You trusted me." A corner of his mouth twitched, a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture that might have been a smile. "I learned that some fights are best won with a scalpel, not a sword, Nurse Jensen." He paused, his gaze softening, a warmth creeping into the dark depths of his eyes that made Elena's breath catch. "You are no trophy, Elena. You are a force." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, with battles fought and won, with trust, earned in the crucible of fear and defiance. Elena felt a strange, thrilling warmth spread through her, a recognition, a connection that transcended their vastly different worlds. He had seen her, truly seen her for who she was, and she in turn had seen the man beneath the monster, the dangerous integrity that defined him. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, not of uncertainty, but of infinite possibility. Salvatore set his glass down, the soft click echoing in the quiet. He took a step closer, then another, until he stood before her, his presence overwhelming, but no longer threatening. He didn't touch her, but the air between them vibrated with a potent, unspoken electricity. "That, Elena," he murmured, his voice a low, dangerous caress, "is entirely up to you, every choice, every boundary, every step." Elena's heart hammered. He wasn't demanding, wasn't taking. He was offering, with a stark, brutal honesty that was uniquely him. Her agency, her consent, the very things she had fought for. She looked up at him into those dark, intense eyes and saw a future, slow and careful, built on mutual respect. A romance forged in fire, defined by choice, not coercion. "Then," she said, her voice firm, resolute, "I choose to see where this goes." Slowly. A genuine smile, rare and breathtaking, touched Salvatore's lips. "Slowly," he agreed. The word, a promise. Months later, Eleanor stood on the rooftop helipad of her hospital, the crisp Los Angeles air whipping. Around her, the beacon light, bright and unwavering, cut through the twilight, a symbol of safety and hope under her watchful eye. Below, the hospital hummed with renewed purpose. Her safety protocols, meticulously implemented, had transformed the environment, making it a true sanctuary for patients and staff alike. She thrived in her role, a leader, a force for change. She was no longer a survivor of harassment, but an architect of safety. And Salvatore, he hadn't just disappeared. He had, in a quiet act of philanthropy that shocked the city, funded a state-of-the-art community wellness center built adjacent to the hospital, focusing on mental health support and anti-extortion legal aid for small businesses. It bore no name, no overt connection to him, but Elena recognized his handiwork, his code, decisive force, never against bystanders, translated into a public act of healing. Their romance was exactly as they'd envisioned, slow, careful, built on consent and boundaries. Dinners at his penthouse, quiet conversations, shared moments of understanding, no grand gestures, no sudden embraces, just an evolving, deepening connection rooted in trust, respect, and a shared, if unconventional, commitment to justice. Elena knew her life would never be truly quiet again, not with Salvatore in it, but it was her life, built on her choices, empowered by her voice. The city lights twinkled below, a vast, complex tapestry. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt truly whole, resolute and healing. If you enjoyed the video, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel to keep up with our content.